Hello, dear friends. I hope you had a peaceful and relaxing day. Now it's time to let go of all the stress. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and step with me into a calm, dreamy world of bedtime stories. So let's begin tonight's tale. And after the story, don't forget to tell me how you liked it, and when and where you're listening from. I'll be waiting in the comments. The King of the Whispering Forest by Moonlight Quill. Once upon a time, in a land embraced by endless forests and quiet streams, there lived a king named Olden. His kingdom, called Lysoria, was known not for its grandeur or riches, but for its harmony with nature and its peaceful spirit. Birds sang in the morning without fear, deer wandered through the open glades, and rivers whispered tales to the trees that lined their banks. King Olden was not a man of war, nor was he interested in conquest. He believed that the greatest strength of a kingdom was not found in its armies or its gold, but in the hearts of its people and the balance they kept with the world around them. And so he ruled not with an iron fist, but with an open hand and a kind smile. Every morning, before the sun climbed over the hills, Olden would wake with the birds and walk barefoot through the palace gardens. The air would still be cool and scented with dew, and the petals of flowers would glisten like tiny stars fallen to the earth. The king would pause beside the rose bushes, nod at the bees humming busily in the lavender, and sometimes speak softly to the trees, though no one else could understand their answers. One such morning, as he strolled beneath the willow trees near the edge of the forest, he found a small creature nestled in the moss, a fox cub no older than a few weeks, shivering and alone. Its fur was silver like moonlight, and its eyes the colour of deep forest pools. Olden knelt and wrapped the cub in his cloak. "You have lost your way, haven't you?" he whispered. The cub did not speak, but it looked at him with eyes so full of knowing that Olden felt, for a moment, that this little animal had a soul far older than its body. He named the fox Luma and raised her in the palace gardens. Though she was free to leave, she never did. Wherever Olden went, Luma followed, silent and graceful. In time, the people of Lysoria came to see her as a guardian spirit, a symbol of the bond between their king and the land. The years passed gently. Seasons came and went like the turning pages of a slow, beloved book. Olden's hair turned silver like Luma's fur, and still he walked each morning in the forest, now leaning gently on a carved staff made of birchwood given to him by the forest elders, a group of druids who lived in the deep woods and rarely showed themselves. They had watched Olden from afar, and when he grew old enough, they came to bless him. "You are a king who listens," they said, "and because you listen, the forest will always answer you. But peace, like everything in the world, is delicate." One autumn, when the leaves turned the colour of flame and the wind carried the scent of wood smoke and pine, a stranger arrived at the palace gates. He was cloaked in black and rode a horse the colour of pitch. His name was Lord Theron, and he ruled a distant land of stone towers and dark valleys where the sun seldom broke through the clouds. "I come to offer friendship," Theron said with a voice as smooth as river stones. But Olden sensed something beneath the surface of the man's words. He invited Theron to stay, to share meals and stories, but he watched carefully. Luma too kept her distance from the man, always watching him from the shadows with unblinking eyes. Theron spoke often of power, of dominion, of the strength found in fear and obedience. He said that Lysoria was too soft, too gentle, that Olden's people needed discipline. "Your kingdom is ripe, old friend," he said one evening as they sat by the fire. "Think what you could do if you ruled not just your peaceful woods, but the mountains, the rivers, the seas, all the lands of the east and west. You have the heart of a king, but you lack ambition." Olden looked into the flames and said, "A tree does not need to rule the forest to be strong. It simply needs deep roots and open sky." Theron smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. The next morning he was gone, but so was the silence. The days that followed were troubled. The wind no longer whispered through the trees, but howled like a warning. Birds flew high and restless. A strange shadow hung in the air, and the animals grew uneasy. Then came news from the border. Black-cloaked soldiers were cutting down trees, building walls and burning fields. Theron had declared war. Alden stood on the balcony of his stone hall and looked out over his land, the forest like waves of green and gold stretching to the horizon. "I will not meet swords with swords," he said to his council, "but neither will I let the forest fall." The Druids returned, summoned by Luma's silent call. They came with walking staffs and wind chimes made of bone and bark, and they listened to the forest with closed eyes and hands pressed to the earth. When they opened their eyes again, they told Alden of a place deep within the heart of the forest, where an ancient tree stood, the Silvara, or Heartwood tree. It was said to be the first tree, born when the world was still new. If Alden could speak to it, perhaps it would help. And so the king, now old and grey but steady as ever, journeyed deep into the forest, Luma by his side. The path grew wild and tangled, and soon even he, who had walked every glade and grove, felt like a stranger. Birds watched in silence, trees leaned close as though listening. At last, after 3 days, they found the Heartwood tree. It was massive, its trunk broader than a castle tower, its branches rising so high they disappeared into the mist. Its bark shimmered faintly with green light, and the air around it was thick with stillness, as if time held its breath. Alden stepped forward and placed his palm against the trunk. "I am Alden of Lysoria," he said. "I seek your wisdom, Great One." Nothing happened at first. Then slowly the tree groaned like a mountain waking. Its bark shifted and a low voice filled the air, not from the tree, but from everywhere at once. "You are not the first to come, but you are the first to ask." Alden bowed his head. "I do not wish to conquer. I only wish to protect." The forest was silent for a long time. Then the Heartwood spoke again. "Then you shall have the gift of the forest's memory." The light around the tree brightened, and the wind began to hum with music. Leaves lifted from the ground, swirling around Alden like golden snow. Luma stepped beside him, her silver fur glowing brighter and brighter until her form vanished into a warm white light. When it faded, Alden stood alone, but something had changed. He could hear the forest, not just the wind, but the language behind it. The song of roots, the rhythm of rivers, the heartbeat of the earth. He returned to Lysoria bearing no sword, no army, but a new kind of power. With a single touch of his hand, grass would grow on burned ground. Trees would rise where walls had stood. Animals once driven away returned to walk beside him. Theron's forces tried to invade, but the forest would not let them. Roots tangled their feet. Mists led them in circles. Their fires would not catch. Their arrows would not fly straight. The soldiers fled, frightened by the silent power that surrounded them. Theron himself vanished, never to be seen again. Peace returned to Lysoria, and Alden ruled for many more years. But he was no longer just a king. He was called the Greenheart, the voice of the forest. When he grew tired, he walked once more to the Heartwood tree. He placed his staff at its roots and sat beside it. "I have done what I could," he said softly. And the forest replied, "You have done well." There, with birdsong in the air and moss beneath him, Alden closed his eyes and fell into the deepest sleep of all, not in sadness, but in peace. Lysoria lived on, green and whole, and the people told stories of the king who ruled not with power, but with harmony. And on quiet mornings, when the wind rustled the leaves just right, some swore they heard his voice in the trees, walking forever through the whispering forest. Long after King Alden had become one with the forest, his story passed into legend. Children grew up hearing tales of the Greenheart King, who could call the trees with a whisper and charm rivers with a glance. Bards sang of the silver fox Luma, and elders told of the day the forest itself rose to protect its own. Generations passed peacefully. The kingdom of Lysoria remained unshaken by war, its people growing crops in harmony with the land, gathering herbs under the moon, and leaving offerings of thanks at sacred groves. But there was one place no one dared to tread, the Heartwood Glade. There, at the base of the oldest tree in existence, stood a stone cairn wrapped in vines, with a single birchwood staff resting against it. This was where Alden had fallen asleep for the last time, and though he was gone, many said they still felt his presence. Birds never nested there, and not even the boldest deer would cross the grove's edge. It was a place of deep magic and deep listening. Far from the grove, in a small village called Elaren on the forest's northern border, lived a girl named Kayla. She was 13 winters old. With hair the colour of oak bark, and eyes like dusk on the river. Kayla was quiet, not because she was shy, but because she liked to listen. She heard the wind in the reeds, the creaking language of pine trees, and the way brook stones spoke in riddles when the water passed over them. Most people heard only noise, but Kayla heard meaning. Her parents, gentlefolk who baked bread and kept bees, didn't know what to make of her strange talents. She could soothe animals with a look, find lost things in the woods, and sometimes knew when someone would fall ill before it happened. Though she never claimed to be special, the village whispered about her in the evenings. Some said she was the forest's child, others, more fearful, said she should be watched closely. But Kayla paid no mind to whispers. She had her own questions. Questions even the trees seemed unwilling to answer. Why did she dream every night of a silver fox? Why did she feel a tug in her chest when the wind blew from the south? And why, always, did the ancient birch tree outside her window seem to lean closer, as if trying to speak? One twilight, when the world had gone blue and the stars peeked over the tree line, Kayla stood in the clearing behind her home and whispered into the night, "I don't know who I am." And the forest replied, not with words, but with silence so deep it rang like a bell. That same night, in the Heartwood glade, something stirred. The birchwood staff that had lain undisturbed for over 100 years glowed faintly, and a single leaf fell from the Silvara tree, drifting like a golden feather to the earth. Miles away, Kayla woke with a start. In her hand was a leaf she had never seen before, golden-veined, soft as silk, and warm to the touch. She held it to her chest, and a voice echoed inside her, so soft it felt like her own thoughts. It begins again. The next morning, Kayla did not tell her parents what had happened. She tucked the leaf into a pouch she wore around her neck and set out for the edge of the forest, following a trail only she could see, a faint shimmer in the air like sunlight caught in cobwebs. It led her away from the village and deeper into the woods than she had ever dared go. Birds watched her from the branches, silent but curious. A rabbit hopped across her path, paused, and then turned to lead her farther in. The forest was guiding her, not with maps or words, but with trust. By dusk, she reached a clearing where the trees grew tall and ancient. In the center stood a stone marker wrapped in ivy. Kayla stepped forward, heart pounding. As she touched the stone, the leaf in her pouch grew hot. Light burst from it in a single silent pulse. From the trees stepped a silver shape, graceful still, with eyes full of stars. The fox, Luma. Kayla fell to her knees, not out of fear, but awe. "You're real?" she whispered. Luma stepped closer and lowered her head. "So are you," came a voice, not spoken, but inside Kayla's mind. "I don't understand. You are the echo of Alden. The forest remembers. It remembers everything, and now it has chosen again." "Chosen what?" "A heart." And then the world faded to white. When Seela awoke, she was no longer in the clearing. She stood in a realm of green twilight, where trees grew upside down and stars hung between their roots. Water flowed in reverse through the air, forming shapes like birds and clouds. This was not a place of men, but of memory. The Heartwood tree stood before her, even larger than the stories had said. Its bark pulsed gently like a heartbeat. A voice filled the air. "We are the memory of the world, and you are a new thought." "I'm no one special," Kayla said. "And yet you hear. I only want to understand. Then listen." And the tree showed her visions of King Alden's life, his walks through the dew-kissed gardens, the rise of Theron, the silence that followed. She saw his love for Luma, his bond with the Druids, and the moment he gave himself back to the earth. Then she saw something more, something even Alden had never seen. A seed, buried deep beneath the Heartwood tree. It glowed softly, beating in rhythm with her own heart. "What is it? A beginning? Of what? What you will choose." Kayla returned to her village changed. She carried no staff, wore no crown, and spoke of no magic. But the people felt it. The bees swarmed more gently around her. Storms avoided her path. Children dreamed more sweetly when she passed near. And then the troubles began. Far to the east, beyond the forest's reach, a dry wind stirred. Rivers shrank, crops withered. Fires burned longer and brighter than they should have. A kingdom known as Meridal, once rich and proud, sent emissaries into Lysoria demanding aid. Kayla watched them from the shadows of the forest. "These men do not ask," Luma said at her side. "They expect. They're afraid, Selah replied, but they've forgotten how to listen. One night she sat beside her parents and asked them, "Would you give away your food if it meant going hungry?" Her mother frowned. "We would share what we could, child, but we must live too," Kayla nodded. She understood, and so she walked once more into the forest, seeking the druids who had once blessed Olden. She found them in a circle of standing stones, humming with ancient power. They greeted her not with surprise, but with bowed heads. "You are the seed," they said. "What do you ask?" "I ask how we protect what must be protected, without closing our hands." The oldest druid, a woman with eyes like ash and moss, answered, "With roots, deep but open." The months that followed were ones of great change. Kayla began to guide her people, quietly, gently, never commanding. She taught them to plant not just for themselves, but for those beyond the forest. She showed them how to share without breaking. Word spread beyond Lysoria of the girl who spoke with foxes and healed with touch. Meridel listened and sent soldiers. They did not come to ask for food, they came to take it, but the forest had not forgotten. As they marched toward the northern edge of the woods, they found their weapons heavy, their horses nervous. The ground turned soft beneath their feet, swallowing their carts. Birds cried above, warning, warning, warning. And then they saw her, Kayla, standing alone, barefoot with the silver fox beside her. "I ask you to stop," she said. The commander laughed. "And if we don't?" She stepped aside. Behind her, trees moved, not swaying, but walking. Roots lifted from the earth like legs, branches stretched like arms. The forest was alive. "You may take nothing that does not want to be taken." The soldiers turned and fled.
Yeah.
Years passed. Kayla grew older, wiser. People began to call her the listener. She never claimed to rule, but the trees bent slightly toward her as she passed. She walked paths unseen, healed sick deer with a word, and once during a drought called rain with a song. She never sat on a throne, but her word became law. And one day, as she sat beside the heartwood tree once more, Luma at her side, the ancient bark shifted. "Are you ready?" the voice asked. "For what?" "To grow." And from the earth rose a new tree, smaller than the Silvara, but born of its roots. Its leaves were golden. Its bark shimmered faintly. It bent toward Kayla and whispered a word only she heard. She smiled. The world had changed again, and peace, once more, took root. Moonlight Quill. The years turned like the slow pages of an old beloved book. Selah, the listener, lived not as a queen, but as a guardian. She never raised a banner or ruled from a throne. Instead, she wandered the glades and hills of Lysoria, planting seeds and speaking with the land. People came to her not for commands, but for comfort. She gave no orders, only understanding. And always the silver fox Luma was near, her eyes calm as moonlight. Beneath the heartwood tree, the sapling that had grown beside Selah continued to rise, its leaves golden and luminous. The druids called it the Auralith, the tree of light. Where the Silvara held the memories of the world, the Auralith held its hopes. One early morning, when the dew was thick on the grass and the sky was still soft with night's final breath, Kayla returned to the heartwood glade. She moved slowly now. Her hair was touched with silver, and her hands bore the quiet strength of years spent healing, planting and protecting. She sat beneath the Auralith's canopy, her legs folded beneath her. Luma curled at her side. "I dreamed of Olden last night," she whispered. Luma lifted her head, but said nothing. She didn't need to. He was walking along a stream, and when he turned to me, he smiled and said nothing at all. Kayla closed her eyes. It felt like goodbye. The Auralith shimmered gently. One golden leaf fell from its branch and landed in Selah's lap. She picked it up and held it over her heart. Far beyond the glade, Lysoria stirred gently into morning. Villagers opened shutters, children fetched water from wells, birds stitched songs through the branches. Peace. Selah breathed it in one final time. "I think," she whispered, "it's time for me to sleep." Luma stood and pressed her nose gently to Selah's cheek. Then Selah lay back, her eyes turned to the canopy of gold above. The Auralith's branches arched over her like a cradle. The forest fell into silence. Not mourning, not sorrow, but a hush, as though listening to the earth inhale. And then, with no pain, no fear, and no regret, Kayla fell asleep. Not forever, not truly, because the forest remembers. That same day, a child named Nemi, born in a village far to the south, looked out the window and saw something strange. A silver fox watching from the tree line, eyes ancient and kind. And in her hand, though she didn't know how it got there, lay a golden leaf. The end.